When you picture a samurai from feudal Japan, what do you see? Probably a powerful man wrapped in armor, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. We think of a warrior class bound by the strict code of Bushido, where honor meant more than life itself. But that picture, as iconic as it is missing something. It leaves out a fierce and formidable truth, a truth that carried a blade all its own. You see, for centuries there was a class of female warriors, noble women trained in the art of war, every bit as skilled and deadly as the men. They were the Onna-Bugeisha, the female martial artists, and their stories have been mostly buried by time. Today we're uncovering one of the most powerful of these silent stories. This is the tale of one of the last true samurai, a woman who, staring down the end of her world, refused to step aside. This is the story of Nakano Takeko and her legendary last stand. In a battle where the honor of the samurai clashed with the cold steel of modern rifles, one woman, Nakano Takeko, led a charge that would become legend. Armed with only a naginata, a traditional polearm, she and her hand-picked unit of female warriors went up against an impossible enemy. They were defenders of a dying age, fighting for a cause that was already lost. This is the story of her incredible defiance, her final ferocious moments, and how she carved her name into the soul of Japan. Before we get to the woman, we have to understand the world that made her. You've probably never heard the term Onna-Bugeisha, but for centuries these women were a respected part of Japan's warrior class. Going as far back as the 3rd century with the legendary Empress Jingu, who is said to have led an invasion of Korea, women of the noble Bushi class weren't just confined to the home. They were expected to be protectors, guardians of their clans and their honor. While men were off on distant battlefields, the Onna-Bugeisha were the last line of defense for their homes and villages. To handle this sacred duty, they were rigorously trained from childhood in martial arts and military strategy. But their education wasn't all about combat. They were often highly literate, schooled in classics, poetry, and calligraphy, striking a balance between cultural refinement and martial skill. Their weapon of choice, the one that became a part of their identity, was the naginata. This elegant but deadly polearm, with its long shaft and curved blade, was a perfect equalizer. Its reach let a smaller warrior keep a larger, sword-wielding opponent at a distance, and it was brutally effective against cavalry. In the hands of a skilled Onna-Bugeisha, the naginata wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of her will. During the peaceful Edo period, the naginata even became a traditional part of a noblewoman's dowry, a symbol of her status and her readiness to defend her family. The Onna-Bugeisha weren't an anomaly. They were a recognized part of the samurai world for centuries. Figures like Tomoe Gozen became legends. Now, it's important to note that Tomoe Gozen appears in the great literary epic, The Tale of the Haikyuu, and historians still debate whether she was a real person. But her story of a warrior so fearsome she was said to be worth 1,000 soldiers was incredibly powerful. It was this legacy, this tradition of the female warrior, that Nakano Takeko was born into. She wasn't the first, but she would become one of the very last, a final, brilliant flame of an era about to be extinguished forever. In April of 1847, in the bustling city of Edo, what we now call Tokyo, a daughter was born to Nakano Heinai, a high-ranking samurai official of the Aizu domain. Her name was Nakano Takeko. She was born into a world of strict loyalty to her lord and the Tokugawa shogunate. Her family was steeped in the warrior ethos. Her father wasn't just an official, but also a scholar and a poet. From her earliest years, it was obvious Takeko was special. By age 6, she had already memorized a classical anthology of 100 poems by 100 different poets, a feat that showed off a sharp mind and incredible discipline. But her education wasn't just books and ink brushes. In a powerful samurai family, martial training was just as important for daughters as it was for sons. She started her training under her father, but her talent soon made it clear she needed a true master. She was sent to train with Akaoka Daisuke, a renowned martial arts instructor. Under him, Takeko's life was a study in contrast. She spent hours practicing the fluid, deadly art of the naginata, conditioning her body for combat. She mastered the Itoru style of swordsmanship, learning the lethal precision of the blade. At the same time, she'd spend hours in quiet contemplation, practicing calligraphy and reading the great works of Chinese classical literature. This dual education was the ideal of the samurai class, to be both a warrior and a scholar. Takeko excelled at both. She became so skilled that she earned a teaching certificate and even worked for a time as an instructor for the wife of a domain lord. Her bond with her teacher, Akaoka Daisuke, became so strong that he officially adopted her. He saw in her the embodiment of the warrior spirit. He even tried to arrange a marriage for her, but the winds of change were howling across Japan. The nation was on the verge of civil war, and Takeko, sensing the storm, refused the match. She felt her destiny was on the battlefield, not in marriage. In 1868, as tensions finally snapped, she traveled for the first time to the land of her ancestors, Aizu, where she began teaching the naginata to other women and children, preparing them for the fight that was coming. The world of Nakano Takeko's youth was a world in chaos. For over 250 years, Japan had been ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate, a military government that kept the country isolated from the rest of the world. But the arrival of American black ships in 1853 shattered that isolation, forcing Japan to face the overwhelming military power of the West. This sparked a deep divide in the country. On one side were those loyal to the Tokugawa shogunate, who wanted to keep the traditional feudal system. On the other was a growing movement to restore power to the Emperor Meiji and rapidly modernize Japan with Western technology. This wasn't just a political squabble, it was a clash of civilizations, a battle for Japan's very soul. The conflict finally exploded into the Boshin War in 1868. At the heart of the shogunate's support was the Aizu domain. The samurai of Aizu were famous for their skill, their discipline, and above all, their absolute loyalty to the Tokugawa. For the Aizu, loyalty wasn't a choice, it was a sacred duty. Their code was simple: what is wrong must not be done. And to them, abandoning the shogun was the ultimate wrong. This fierce loyalty made Aizu the #1 target for the new imperial forces. The Imperial Japanese Army was a modern fighting force, armed with advanced rifles, devastating Gatling guns, and powerful cannons. They were a massive modern army fighting a new kind of war. Against this machine stood the Aizu. Though they had some modern firearms, their forces were still rooted in samurai traditions. They relied on the sword, the spear, and the bow. They fought with a courage forged in the ancient code of Bushido, but courage is a poor shield against a rifle bullet. As the war raged on, the shogunate's allies fell one by one. By the autumn of 1868, the Aizu domain stood nearly alone, a fortress of the old world facing the unstoppable tide of the new. The imperial army closed in, and the stage was set for a final, tragic showdown, the Battle of Aizu. As the imperial army marched on Aizu, Nakano Takeko knew she couldn't just watch. The land of her ancestors was facing total destruction. For her, the path of honor was clear. She had to fight. She went before the senior Aizu retainers, naginata in hand, and asked for permission to join the battle. They flatly refused. The Aizu code was rigid. Battle was for men. Women were to defend the home, and if all was lost, to take their own lives to avoid the dishonor of capture. They were not allowed to fight as an official part of the army. But Nakano Takeko wasn't one to be stopped by rules. She argued, she insisted. She was a certified master of the martial arts, as skilled as any man preparing for battle. To deny her the right to fight was an insult to her training and her honor. Her fierce determination started to win people over. More importantly, she wasn't alone. Inspired by her defiance, other women stepped forward. Her own mother, Koko, and her teenage sister, Yuko, joined her. Friends, students, and other women of the samurai class, all trained with a naginata, rallied to her cause. They formed a small, determined group, ready to die for Aizu. Faced with this defiant band of women, the Aizu commanders finally gave in. Sort of. They wouldn't be an official part of the Aizu army. No formal recognition, no place in the chain of command. But they would be allowed to fight, unofficially, independently. And so the Joshitai, or the Girls' Army, was born. It was a rogue unit of 20 to 30 women, bound by loyalty and a burning desire to protect their home. Nakano Takeko, just 21 years old, was their leader. The story goes that the day before their fateful charge, a shogunate army colonel, Furuya Sakuzaimon, formally designated her as the unit's leader, giving them a sliver of recognition. They had no official sanction, but they had a cause, they had their weapons, and they had each other. The Forbidden Army was ready for its last stand. The climax of the siege came in October 1868 at the Yanagi Bridge, a key approach to Aizu Wakamatsu Castle. The imperial forces, an army of thousands, were making a final push. The air was thick with gunpowder smoke and the thunder of cannons. Rifle fire tore through the Aizu ranks, who fought back with desperate courage. Into this hellstorm charged Nakano Takeko and the Joshitai. It must have been an unbelievable sight. A small band of women armed with sweeping naginatas, launching a frontal assault against an army with modern weapons. At their head was Takeko, her weapon a blur of motion. The imperial soldiers were stunned. Seeing they were facing female warriors, their commanders initially ordered them to hold their fire. This hesitation, born of sheer disbelief, was a fatal mistake. It gave the Joshitai the opening they needed. They slammed into the imperial lines with a ferocity that defied all expectation. Nakano Takeko was a whirlwind of destruction. So is this where the legend of her taking 200 heads comes from? That number is a myth born from the chaos and awe of the battle. But the historical reality is no less heroic. Contemporary sources confirm she cut down 5 or 6 enemy soldiers in brutal, close-quarters combat. The fact that her skill was magnified into such a grand legend tells you everything you need to know about the terror she inspired that day. For a few frantic moments, the Joshitai held their own. They fought like cornered lionesses, each woman a master of her weapon, fighting for her family, her home, and her honor. They proved that the warrior spirit of Aizu didn't just belong to its men, but courage couldn't stop bullets. The initial shock wore off, and the imperial soldiers opened fire. The riflemen unleashed a volley of lead. With no defense against modern firearms, the Joshitai began to fall. And then a single shot found its mark. A bullet slammed into Nakano Takeko's chest. The leader of the Forbidden Army, the last great Onna-Bugeisha, fell to the blood-soaked ground. As Nakano Takeko lay dying on the battlefield, her thoughts weren't of fear. They were of honor. In the samurai world, death in battle was glorious. But to have your head taken by the enemy as a trophy was the ultimate disgrace. It was a symbol of total defeat. Takeko knew the imperial soldiers would swarm her position. She would not allow them to claim her head. With her last bit of strength, she turned to her younger sister Yuko, who had fought by her side. Her final words were a command, a desperate plea to preserve her honor. She asked Yuko to cut off her head and save it from the enemy. It was a horrific, unthinkable task for a 16-year-old girl to perform on her own sister. But Yuko was a daughter of Aizu, a samurai to her core. She understood the weight of this final duty. To refuse would be to condemn her sister's spirit to an eternity of shame. With tears streaming down her face, she agreed. With the help of another Aizu soldier, Ueno Yoshisaburo, Yuko fulfilled her sister's last wish. In the middle of the raging battle, she ensured that Nakano Takeko's final moments were defined by the code she lived by. As the battle raged on, Yuko retrieved her sister's head. She carried it from the battlefield, a grim and sacred burden, to the safety of the Hokai-ji, a nearby family temple. There, with the help of the temple priest, Nakano Takeko's head was honorably buried beneath a pine tree. Her body had fallen, but her honor had been saved. Her naginata, the weapon that had served her so well, was donated to the temple, a lasting relic of her courage. The Battle of Aizu ended as it was always going to. After a month-long siege, the starving defenders of the castle surrendered. The Aizu domain fell, and with it, the age of the samurai came to an end. The Meiji Restoration was complete, and Japan turned towards a modern future. In this new Japan, the stories of the old world began to fade. The samurai class was abolished, their traditions set aside. And yet, the story of Nakano Takeko refused to disappear. Her bravery and sacrifice became a powerful symbol, not just for the fallen Aizu, but for the unbreakable spirit of Bushido itself. She became the embodiment of the Onna-Bugeisha, the last great example of a tradition of female warriors that had been nearly erased from the official histories. Her story challenged the new Western-influenced narrative of the submissive Japanese woman, a potent reminder that women had once been warriors, leaders, and heroes. Her legacy is a living tradition. A monument was erected next to her grave at the Hokaiji Temple. And every year during the Aizu Autumn Festival, a procession of young girls, dressed in traditional hakama and white headbands, marched to honor the bravery of Nakano Takeko and her joshitai. They carry naginata not as weapons of war, but as symbols of strength and a history that refuses to be forgotten. Nakano Takeko's life was short, ending when she was just 21. But the truth of her story is more powerful than any myth. The truth is that a young woman, in a time when women were forbidden from the battlefield, refused to play by the rules. She raised her own army, led them in a charge against impossible odds, and died with her honor intact, a true samurai to the very end. If you found this story of defiance and honor as incredible as we did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of history's hidden heroes. Let us know in the comments which historical figure you'd like us to cover next. Nakano Takeko remains an enduring icon. Her story is a testament to the fact that courage and skill are not qualities exclusive to men. She was a warrior of the old world who met the new one on her own terms, with her naginata in hand. Her true legacy lies in her defiance, her leadership, and the single profound act of leading a forbidden army into one of history's most tragic last stands. She is Nakano Takeko, one of the last samurai of Japan, and a warrior whose story will inspire for generations to come.